Listen. Life is made up of a myriad of coincidences, which are strung together in mysterious ways. These coincidences create in real life what we call stories, but unlike a fable or novel, there might not be a moral, an elaborate beginning or end. The following events I am about to share is a true story from Lambeth Walk on the 10th of February 2019, where I first came across a man and his collection of curiosities. Lambeth Walk has left a great impression on me. It is a grey and unpopulated street, and there seems to be more pigeons than pedestrians. Most storefronts are vacant apart from a few surviving businesses, including a self-service laundrette, 2 off-license shops, and a fish and chips shop run by a Chinese couple. I was doubtful if there was anything interesting after the 1,000 steps I took to get from one end of the street to another, but I was later proven to be wrong. After unsuccessfully bribing an off-license shopkeeper to talk to me by buying a bag of salted pistachios, I spoke to Khan from another convenience store. Do you know about the famous song Lambeth Walk from the musical Me and My Girl performed in 1937? I asked him. In the 40s, the song brought about an international popularity for Lambeth Walk, which had a bustling street market back then. No, he said. But if you're interested in music, then you should talk to the musician next door. A musician? Yes, Khan said, walking out of his shop to wave at a middle-aged, well-built man who was sweeping leaves off the pavement. He was wearing a black leather vest, a short-sleeved shirt, and a black newsboy cap. She wants information, Khan told him, as if I were an MI6 agent. The man looked at me with slight suspicion. I introduced myself briefly before the man said, "Come on in," he said, and turned to my left, where my eyes met this shop I never noticed before, as if it magically appeared. The window display featured an eccentric exhibition of curious objects. On the shelves were books, album covers, and ephemera featuring portraits of black people, dark metal sculptures, 3 retro desk phones, and in the center, a vintage CRT TV playing a Fletcher animation sequence.
When you see people who come past this window, and Kayla, you may be one of those people, when you come past a window like this, people stop, they get out their cameras, they get out their phones, they start talking.
I followed him through the door when there was more, a lot more. It is impossible to describe everything in detail because it wasn't a room where each object is a separate element. Together, they create an environment evoking a feeling of nostalgia, comfort, and awe. The room was slightly dimmed, filled with objects hanging on the red brick wall. African artifacts such as stone sculptures and shields, children's metal tricycles, 2 bongo drums, black dolls and figurines, retro machines, and many more. Contained within this vintage collection was a lounge-like setting with leather and wooden furniture, big comfortable chairs, and a wooden grand piano. Jazzy music played in the background. This place felt like a nest, a comfy hidden corner where you could put your mind at ease.
I think there's a word called experiential. You experience it here, rather than it being something that you go in, you look, and you go.
Now what do you want to talk about? He sat down and asked me with intensity. We were the only people in the room. I was flabbergasted, to be honest. All of this, how this shop came about, who he is. He told me his name was Osho, and this place was Osho's gallery, a personal collection of antiques and vintage collectibles he used to sell. I asked if he was a musician. Osho shook his head. No, I wouldn't call myself that, more like a music enthusiast. But I do teach children's piano classes here, he said. He also has a music boutique next door at 161 Lambeth Walk, but he teaches piano there too. He pointed to a wooden grand piano beautifully poised on our right.
But the piano is an amazing instrument. And I can't play. I'm going to tell you now, I cannot play, but I can teach any child.
How could someone teach piano if they cannot play? It would be hard to explain to you everything now, because what I do cannot be answered in a few sentences, Osho said. He kept looking at the door, as if he was anticipating a student to turn up any moment. Come again on Saturday, he said, and suddenly I was again back on the deserted, empty walk. There were a million questions I had yet to ask Osho about, and how did I manage to miss this gem of a shop? There was no trace of Osho's gallery to be found on Google, save for the address embedded in Google Map, 161 Lambeth Walk. But nothing more, not an image of the interior or a description. It felt like a secret chamber you would unlock with the wave of a wand, and Osho a wizard or treasure keeper who had more secrets to unveil. Before Saturday, I paid a visit to the Metropolitan Archives, hoping I could dig out some of Lambeth Walk's history. The oldest document I accessed dated back to the last century, and amongst one of them was this intriguing council report contained in an A3 paper folder bundled up in string. On 24th of August in 1962, roughly 50 years ago, a sweets shop owner called Peter Frederick Davis had written to the council about applying for a music and dancing license for conducting music classes in his shop's basement, situated on Lambeth Walk. In the file, a hastily written pink note read,
I told the applicant we would do our best on this but did not promise anything. P.S. The applicant proposes to apply for an annual license. He's writing on this.
On a yellow piece of paper was written,
Very urgent, for the 3rd of September. Please arrange survey with Eugene and obtain sufficient detail for sustainability letter for annual license at the same time.
The officers paid a visit to Mr. Davis' shop. The basement was 180 square feet and had only one bed, a mini gas cooker, a prop sink and a very small window. It was separated from the confessory upstairs by a matchboard ceiling and wooden floor. The room was only 1.7 meters in height. It was where Mr. Davis lived. The report fascinated me. I flipped back to the front page, which gave me the answer I expected. Mr. Davis's application was ultimately rejected because his basement, or where he lived, had poor ventilation, no lavatory, and no emergency lighting. The wall linings were made of combustible materials, and the room was too small. An officer's letter documented Mr. Davis's response upon being informed.
After I explained the procedure he should follow, he said, Well, you'd better forget about it, but do I get my 10 bob back? I said he probably would.
Mr. Davis got his 10 quid application fee back, and that was the end of the story. It must have been uncommon back then to have a privately operated music and dancing room, especially in a working-class area like Lambeth Walk. Living conditions were poor, and those who owned shops eked a living out of selling food, vegetables, and other necessities. In the early 1900s, the best entertainment you could get to stretch your legs after a hard day's work would be going to dancing halls with your friends.
After a meal and a change of clothes into a dark suit, the day's work is left behind. The weekend begins with playing subs at the club. All the same, Friday is the most popular night of the week. Everybody comes. A weekday evening's dancing isn't very serious, but a dance is a good way of being together. So the records are turned up loud, and every night at the club is dance night. Those who can't jive, or those who don't feel like it, can hang about and chat, or horse around, or just stand alone and watch the girls.
She's only putting on the style. Well, putting on the agony, putting on the style. That's what all the young folks are doing all the while. And as I look around me, I sometimes have to smile, seeing all the young folks putting on the style.
I looked up on Google to see if there were any traces left of Mr. Davis. I started searching with the street number his shop was on, and then I froze. I could not believe what I had very nearly missed. Out of all the places it could have been, Mr. Davis's shop, as marked very clearly on the council report, was located on 161 Lambeth Walk. 161 Lambeth Walk, where Osho's Gallery and Music Boutique is now. I walked to the Lambeth Archive to investigate old maps of the area. The redevelopment of the walk started in 1969, 7 years after Mr. Davis's application. As shown on a map from 1978, the street number 161 had been shifted 10 numbers towards the south after redevelopment, so Mr. Davis's shop would have physically been in the current 151, facing Hamish Street, which was demolished. But hypothetically, 161 had been and is the only spot on Lambeth Walk where Mr. Davis wanted to make music more accessible, where Osho has fulfilled the same wish. The universe strings together resonating things and people in mysterious ways. In not so mysterious ways, music and dancing has always brought people of different genders, classes, and races together. When I visited Osho again the following Saturday, he warmed up to me upon opening the door. "Do you want tea or coffee?" he asked me, as Osho's collection also served as a cafe on the side. Having been called boring for choosing a normal black tea, I opted for Assam with milk. Osho does not know about Mr. Davis, and he too is amazed by this coincidence. He opened his shop here 20 years ago because the rent was affordable, and it was not a desirable area back then.
In the 2000s, there was no Lupino house. That was a complete and utter building site. There were still metal steel fences that were erected all the way down the Lambeth Walk to where Lollard Street is now, and the Lambeth Walk was in seriously and severe decline, rapidly declining.
Osho said back in the days, tourists came here on coaches just to see what the famous Lambeth Walk was like. They were disappointed, of course.
I still think we're very fortunate in the Lambeth Walk. There's so much history in this area, not least of all, of course, the song The Lambeth Walk.
It's a pity how Lambeth Walk is now, all grey and empty, I said. Yes, Osho laughed.
It's not going to return to what its former glory because things change. It's the one constant in life is change. So I'm not in a position to change those things. All I'm in a position to do is do what I think I can do that can affect a change within the environment that I'm in, and that is literally my teaching and having a little bit of having a little bit of a window that people can look back at and be nostalgic about.
Osho pointed at one of the barber chairs. That's where grandparents like to sit when they're waiting for the class to end, he said.
We've had grandparents who've come in and have told stories and have broke down crying, telling their grandchild the story because it's the first time they've been in a space where that's been allowed.
It's healthy to have an understanding of what came before us, Osho said, and I nodded in agreement. In an age of information overload, overstimulation, and quick digest, it may become increasingly difficult to look beyond the surface of what we see, to consolidate, to feel. Would you stop by Osho's window display, even for a second you thought it was interesting? Would you allow yourself to feel sentimental, nostalgic, and intrigued?
You know that there's an emotional link between everything you do.
It's good to have strong feelings. But for living in the world, a bit of knowledge is needed too, and a bit of curiosity to look further than the headlines of the morning paper.
I was always into antiques, vintage, anything that was old and honestly made for the most part. and I was always drawn to things that had a resonance in terms of, if I walk past, I think, oh my God, I remember that when I was a child. So I'd buy it based on my relationship to that memory of that item. And all of a sudden it became very personal, and it was really hard to sell it, even if you were trying to make an income.
Osho started out selling furniture he designed, subsequently vintage antiques and toy pianos, which he then gave up selling and kept as his personal collection since. His shop has also been a barbershop, a second-hand fashion shop, an events platform, and more. But it was a lady who visited regularly, Osho said, who suggested him to have music lessons here because it was such a comforting environment. More people who Osho knew became interested in the idea, and eventually the music teaching business rolled along. Now, how do you teach children music if you aren't much of a piano player? I asked Osho. You would have to find a way to make it fun for the children. Osho smiled slyly. Why would a child be interested in learning piano when they could be playing on their scooter or playing football? You would have to make it fun for them and bring in their interests.
Okay, we're going to take a free kick now. You ready? Okay, let's get to the piano. You can come running up with your hands in position now. Okay, so you're just focusing now on the goal. The goal is to go from C to C. That's 8 notes. Okay, that's what we call an octave. Are you ready? Deep breath, because if you miss it, I'm afraid your manager's going to be really upset with you because we've lost the championship. Okay, so you're ready. And you'd use these types of words, these type of sentences, and you'd be surprised how seriously they took it, because in their mind, they are lining up to take a penalty. They are lining up to take a free kick, but it's a piano.
Osho is happy to make children laugh. In his words, to educate rather than teach. To bring out of a child a sense of selfhood through the accomplishment of playing an octave.
This is the amazing thing about something seemingly so insignificant, teaching somebody piano or guitar or violin or vocals. Music is so intimately, emotionally, physically, vicariously, I don't know what you want to say, it permeates so many layers of your being.
Apart from Osho's music boutique, where piano, violin, guitar and singing lessons for children take place, Osho's gallery partially houses the study boutique for English and mathematics classes. Teaching has always been Osho's passion. Osho has worked in education during the 80s, and his first port of call was teaching children with autism.
And certainly working with so-called difficult children, because they're not difficult. They're not. They just need someone to listen to them a little bit of time. I mean, my background is from foster care. And foster care in the 50s, 60s, the narrative is what you're hearing now. Some of the heinous things that happened, that was standard. And many people will tell you that, and many people won't, because the dynamic for the most part is once you leave that system, you want to try and forget it. You want to try and move on, get your life together, and make sure that when you have your children, that you're the best parent that you can be. You don't want the same malevolence happening to them that may or may not have happened to you. So from that background, whenever I'm faced with somebody saying, oh, you know, my children are very difficult, or going into a classroom where they're saying, oh, they're special educational needs or they're violent, 9 out of 10, that is not the case.
You should talk to Ari. Osho changed the subject. He gestured me over to a secret door at the back of the room. It led to a short passage. Down a basement, I thought. But then we entered Osho's music boutique next door. A bright, spacious room with a black, glossy grand piano and a sleek selection of vintage displays. Osho introduced me to Ari, who was about to teach a lesson there. She has been teaching here for 10 years. The rock the business was built on, as Osho had put it.
Between myself and Eri during those days, we were able again to build up this small community social enterprise, stage by stage, bit by bit. And you know, there were points in it which even I thought, you know, it's long, it's hard, it's arduous. I was working as well as a lorry driver at the time, long hours, and I'd still come in maybe at 6:30 in the morning to open the shutters. We didn't have electric shutters then.
What would be your biggest reward out of all these years? I asked Osho, and his face brightened up with the light that shone from the floor-to-ceiling windows.
But the journey was worth it. It's a beautiful thing when you see a child that comes to you, they may be 7 or 4 or 5, and they're here for a year or 5 years or 7 years, and you see them develop, and they do their grade 1, and then they do their grade 2, then they're playing Mozart, then they're playing Chopin, then they're playing Beethoven. You're like, wow. Then they're 15. And then you see them again, and they're now a father of a 1-year-old child. I can't explain to you that journey and that feeling that money can't buy that feeling. Only the time, the love, the passion that you have for education.
There was a ring from the doors. In came a young girl and her mother, the girl carrying a backpack and an eager smile on her face. I better not disturb the lesson.
It's as I say, it's been an interesting journey, and I hope this journey continues for another 2 decades. I'm happy to die at the piano, okay, teaching a student. That's a beautiful way to go, and ultimately, you can leave the world just a little bit better than you found it. That's it.
Come back any time you want, Osho said. Nothing's gonna change. Not now, at least. As I left Osho's gallery and music boutique, I cannot help but think how precious this place is out of what's left in London. Little did I know what would happen exactly 2 days after. On the Monday morning, I sent Osho a text on when I should come visit him again. In 15 minutes, I received a grave reply I never could have anticipated. Kayla, I have just come into the gallery today and found that the gallery has been served with a Section 25 notice, which means essentially the landlord is attempting to close down my business. Currently, I'm now in the process of obtaining legal advice as to my position. Ultimately, Kayla, all plans of anything regarding the work with you will be cancelled immediately due to the seriousness I now find myself in, and all my attention, time and resources will have to be concentrated on saving the gallery from imminent demise. Please accept my apologies, but I had no idea the situation was going to present itself. Osho. I was in shock. I could not believe how this was happening right in front of my eyes, in real time, to have one letter take away the nest Osho has built on bit by bit for the past 2 decades. I cannot imagine how it must have felt for him. The gallery was an extension of him, a place where memories, emotional links, and human connections were made and treasured. I spent the next Friday sulking on Lambeth Walk, intimidated by a sober, red-eyed, off-license shopkeeper who looked like he just smoked a full pack of fags, realizing that there was no one else to talk to. While I didn't dare to disturb Osho, but to some extent I had to, I came here after all. The shutters of Osho's gallery were closed. The lights were off in the music boutique, and it was hard to see if anyone was inside. I leaned in closer, half hoping that no one was there. But a black shadow moved, and there was Osho. He saw me, waved, and opened the door. "Come on in," he said with the same reassurance, as if nothing had happened. Our conversation followed. Osho told me about the letter. The property management company of Lambeth Walk, Watmoss Community Homes, has decided to relocate both of Osho's shops, Osho's gallery at 159 and music boutique at 161, to another vacant shop on Lambeth Walk. The problem is, given the size of Osho's antique collection, it would be impossible to fit everything into one shop. He would also have to utterly demolish and rebuild the whole interior, since many of his collectibles were hung on the wall. I asked Osho what his reaction was when he received the letter. He gave a heavy sigh.
Good question. My reaction when I got the letter from Watmoss Community Homes, was it wasn't so much a reaction, it was a feeling. There was a feeling. It was a feeling that I was about to lose everything that I'd worked for. It's a feeling of not being anywhere, almost sort of a disbelief that, you know, this could happen in this way. You know, we're not in arrears of our rent. We haven't caused any problems in the community. You know, there isn't anything untoward about this business. We've tried really hard to keep it almost like a perfect business, because you're working with people's most cherished belongings. That's their children. So, but I felt devastated. If I'm true, that it's a good word to use, because it does devastate you. It takes away your confidence. It takes away your self-assurance. It takes away your future. You know, I'm not of an age now where I can go down to the job centre and get a job cleaning, although I would do if I needed to keep this place going, absolutely.
Osho said the rent renewal assessment has been done a few months ago. Nothing was wrong with the shops. Then why, out of all the shops, has Watmos chosen yours, and only yours to reclaim? I asked. The answer was much simpler. Convenience. It turns out that the office of Watmos Community Homes is at 163 Lambeth Walk, right beside Osho's Music Boutique at 161. They wanted to expand their office, and Osho's shops, obviously, were in the nearest proximity. I recall walking past their office before approaching Osho today. The office was closed, with a piece of paper stuck on the door in capital letters.
This office is currently closed due to staff shortages. Please contact us on the office's telephone number or visit the held TMO office if you require assistance.
Only at the moment before I entered Osho's gallery did I see a man coming by to unlock the office door. It was around 1:30 p.m. Despite the fact that Watmos owns a good portion of other MC shops on the Lambeth Walk, as well as the Ethelred estate nearby, the reclamation of Osho's shops does seem to be a logical decision. It is nearest to the office, after all. But there seems to be a gulf between their and Osho's interpretation of the word community.
The unity in community. Let me say that word again. The unity is up one more time. The unity in community is the key part of community. That unity, that relationship between your neighbour, that relationship between the person over the road who may come over and say, "Oh, Osho, can you look after my keys for me? I'm just going out for a little while." So it's about that trust, the T, the R, the U, the S, the T. Trust, which is another form of unity, okay? And I'd like to think that the Osho Gallery, the Music Boutique, all the things that we've tried to do here has created a very, very strong link with everybody in the community, because there were children that when we came here weren't born that are now 20.
There was no prior discussion or negotiation with Osho. The decision had been made, the printed letter taped on Osho's front door Monday morning. Sure, they absolutely have the right to do so under the law, Osho said. But is there something other than the law? The mission statement of Watmos Community Homes on their website is ironically as follows: to create strong, sustainable communities within safe and pleasant neighborhoods through resident control and locally accountable tenant management. What Osho and I find most heartbreaking, perhaps, is the difference in understanding what builds and gives value to a community.
This is a gold mine in a community that really, for the most part, there isn't anything else here. You've got a chip shop which has changed hands. You've got a pizza place which wasn't the pizza place, that was Aussie's Cafe. And I would say that the Osho Gallery and Collection is most definitely a community asset. Why? Because you'd be hard pressed to find in communities like this something like this. Because when a community starts to go into decline, the first thing that happens is obviously people want to redevelop it. And effectively, capitalism and community don't always sit hand in hand. And I'm aware of that. When you're living in the local authority areas, you're not in control of that area, you're not in control of that accommodation the local authority are. So if they decide for whatever reason that they're going to sell that part of land for X amount of millions and redevelop it, you are moved out, you're moved on. That is it. And we've seen that happen with the Haygate estate, we've seen that happen down the other end of Elephant and Castle, the Aylesbury estate. We've seen that happen many, many times, and I'm sure that's going to continue to happen.
The Lambeth Walk has been redeveloped several times over 50 years. In fact, a lot of news articles seem to be quite upset about the idea of the new Lambeth Walk, with community homes which were forcefully built, and street market traders who were no longer allowed to be there.
I mean, at the time, nobody would have guessed that this area, you'll be paying, upwards of $500,000 for an apartment, which is something that most of the people that were born and bred here couldn't wait to get off the estate because of the nature of how they saw it being poor, being hard. So what drives a community nowadays is money. What drives a community nowadays is whether or not they can demolish that community and erect maybe 50 tower blocks, which doesn't build a community. Although I suppose it does, it builds a community of tower blocks, but not of people.
It's easy to get depressed and feel like there is nothing he could do, Osho told me. So he has to keep busy. He could have, in his words, accepted the defeat, but it is also worth a try fighting back. Osho and his daughter are currently in the process of creating a Facebook campaign and organizing more public events, hoping the community he built will have his back. The ideal scenario is if they could persuade Whatmost community homes to reconsider their decision, which is not final until they report to the council panel.
So obviously, when you get a letter like that, you're just trying to think, how do I defend that? Because obviously law is one thing, community and the unity of community is another. I'm hoping, really hoping, that the community and the unity in the community is more powerful than the legal law.
We are the Lambeth boys. We are the Lambeth boys. We know our manners. We spend our talents. We are respected wherever we go. As we're riding down the Lambeth Walk, oh, the wind is over wide. Dee-Yan-Key, knock a copper in the eye. We are the Lambeth boys. Oh, oh.
In retrospect, everything seems eerily connected and perfectly timed. I have come to Osho not knowing the stories hidden behind his modest storefront, not knowing the challenge that would happen days after I spoke to him. It is time to speak of these true human conditions from communities which are so valuable yet so overlooked. There are a lot more stories worth being told, he said.
For us, being part of the community for so many years allows us privileges to hear stories, to hear events that happen in people's lives. Be that people sadly passing away, which has happened just recently with a lady over the road, Auntie Pearl. Be that with Naomi and Jack being in the position where Jack's brother passed, and on the day they heard the news, Naomi heard the news that she was pregnant, and they'd been trying for a while for a child. You'd have wonderful stories. You'll be wealthy. If stories were your wealth, you would be a billionaire within a short period of time. Obviously, that's not the case.
The opposite of ignorance is knowing. Knowledge is power. What if I had not been to Lambeth Walk? Would that make much of a difference at all? What if you had not listened to the story today? Would it make a difference too? I am reminded of Osho's motto, as printed on his customized envelopes. There is a reason, season, and purpose for all things. There is a street in Hong Kong where I am from. It is situated in the Central District, a grey road with 2 driving lanes and a narrow walkway. The name of the street is Nam Bo Gang, which translates directly to Lambeth Walk. In some ways, I have done the Lambeth Walk from Hong Kong to the Lambeth Walk in London, across a distance 9,626.35 kilometers long. Is this my final destination? I do not know, but hopefully Lambeth Walk still has a long way to go.
I love what we stand for here, and I hope as time goes on we can still touch people's lives and leave this world, and if not this world, certainly this little bit of South London, okay, a little bit better than what it was when we came.